is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure.
Welcome to Views from the World Tree. On today's episode, we discuss current events, personal news, and the Roswell incident. And now, on with the episode.
For personal news this week, I wanted to have a continuation of what I talked about a few weeks ago. I finished reading the book Rewilding by Micha Mortali, and it was pretty good. Like, we might look at covering it in more detail in a future episode. Maybe not dedicated to the book, but maybe dedicated to the concept. But I did have two things from it that I learned that I wanted to discuss for a couple minutes, not for too long. So there was two quotes that I highlighted. First one says, "Mindfulness is the practice of bringing attention to what is happening in the present moment while letting go of judging the moment as good or bad. In mindful rewilding, mindfulness is a tool to train yourself to be here, now, with the earth as it is, as you allow yourself to lean into pleasant experiences in nature and enjoy them fully." What do you think about that?
I really like that, actually. I've always thought of mindfulness as kind of taking a moment to yourself and thinking about, or just not necessarily thinking, but being in the present, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that idea of reconnecting as part of your mindfulness, more meditation than actually just being present. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. I mean, I guess that's why I highlighted it, but that's something that I always struggle with is just being present in the moment without trying to say, okay, is this good? What's happening? Is this bad? Because I tend to overanalyze things so much that it's kind of a negative feedback loop. Like when I am in a moment and I'm experiencing something, I automatically jump to, okay, well, like, how is this going to be good? How is this going to be bad? What am I going to do about it? And it just creates this feedback loop of stress that doesn't really, honestly doesn't really help the situation. So it's been good as I've been reading the book to try and let go of that a little bit.
Yeah, sorry to jump in there. I read a book called The Joy of Living a while ago. It's by a lama from Tibetan Buddhism, and just that quote made me think, because he talked a lot about how there's no such thing as a good thought or a bad thought. There's just a thought, and we're happier when we just acknowledge that it is a thought and it doesn't have a connotation of good or bad attached to it. So I don't know. It's just interesting that this rewilding book and then this book written from a Tibetan Buddhist is a similar mission. Sorry. Helicopter just flew over my house. Anyway.
So one other quote, I was actually pleasantly surprised as I was reading the book, because in the beginning there was a few things he was talking about that made me think, oh great, this is just some dirty hippie writing about hugging trees and walking outside without your shoes. But he actually seems to be a bit of a nerd, a bit of a guy after my own heart. So he talked about Star Wars at one point, and he had a quote in here where he talked about Tolkien, which is probably my all-time favorite author. So anyway, I marked this paragraph too. It says, "Tolkien's writing contains many references to the power of walking. He often referred to the road as something like a conveyor belt. Once you step onto it, it can sweep you away. Being in nature without an agenda or destination is another form of mindfulness meditation and can allow our brains to rest from the directed attention that modern life often requires. How about this one? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh man, that's basically the preface for The Hobbit, right? Like, the road's a dangerous thing because once you step on it, you never know where you'll end up, type of thing. And I couldn't agree more. I find myself most happy, most present when I've left all my electronics behind and when I'm just hiking. It's just me aimlessly walking. So yeah, complete agreement.
Yeah, it's obvious why I marked this passage. I would echo everything that you just said. And I'll get into a little bit more of it when we go into current events, because my current event actually ties in nicely with it. So how about personal news for you? What did you have this week?
My week has been spent doing home improvement. Last weekend, about the time that our previous episode came out, I was in a 3-day prep into pouring some epoxy counters, and it was kind of fun. My wife and I, we found a recipe for the epoxy coloring for the dye pattern that would make it look like a Carrari marble. And so I think I said that right. I don't know. But we mixed them up, and after we prepped everything, we poured the epoxy, and I think it actually does look like a slab of marble, unless you get too close and then you see air bubbles and drips where our inexperience shine through. But
no, I saw pictures on Instagram. I can testify. It looked really good. I was very impressed.
Yeah, so that's really our only news. I'll be putting them up on the Views from the World Tree website, which we will be launching here very soon. So
nice.
Keep an eye out for that.
Yes, I see. Good news, everyone!
All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into current events then. So like I said, the current event that I had to talk about this week kind of ties in with what I was talking about with mindfulness. So I was listening to an interview with a Stanford neuroscientist named Dr. Andrew Huberman. And you can look this up on YouTube, which is where I found it. Just Google search Andrew Huberman, neuroscientist, and you'll find he actually has quite a few videos. But the one that I was looking at specifically, he was talking about dopamine and how society has a huge problem with dopamine dependency or dopamine addiction. And which, I've heard about multiple times from multiple different people. I'm sure a lot of our listeners have too. The thing that was different about Dr. Huberman's interview is he pointed out that the problem with modern dopamine dependency is not just a dependency on pleasures, which is what releases dopamine, but it's when we experience pleasure without prior requirement or pursuit. He said that experiencing that without having to work for it is really terrible for us as individuals and as a group collective. He also had an interesting perspective on addiction and how addiction is a progressive narrowing in the things that bring you pleasure. And conversely, a good life is a progressive expansion of the things that bring you pleasure, especially through motivation and hard work. And so if you experience like pain, friction, and effort, the rewards are much greater when they do come. And it was interesting. I'd never had it I never heard it explained quite that way, but I think it makes a lot of sense. If you think about somebody that's going through addiction, or if you've been through addiction yourself, it's, that next hit, you always need to go a little bit further, take a little bit more. So it's a really good way to describe it. Did you have any thoughts before I continue?
No, I mean, I'm thinking back to my Psychology 101 class where they kind of talked about the dopamine receptors and the brain, and that's the reason why cocaine and tobacco is so addictive, is because it really messes with those. And so it's kind of interesting to hear the narrowing, or it explained as narrowing of sensations, because I don't know, I've seen it in some of my ex-friends' lives, I've seen it in personal experiences, and yeah, I can agree.
So the specific thing that he was talking about that I want to try and jump to, so I don't dwell too long on this, but he was talking about the dopamine that we get from social media and the neurological effect of context switching, which is something that as a software engineer, we actually talk about a lot, about the cost of context switching. So if I'm sitting there and I'm writing code and somebody asks me a question, it might take me 30 seconds to answer their question. But then when I go back, for me to context switch back and pick up where I was, I could lose 30 minutes of time. And so he pointed out that as we scroll through like a TikTok page or through an Instagram feed, your brain is continually experiencing this context switch from one post to another. And it does that while you're laying in bed or while you're sitting in a chair. And so it's really jarring psychologically and physiologically for our brain, because normally when you context switch, it's when you physically walk from one room to another, or like you leave your house, there's some physical transition that helps your brain deal with that switch. But when you're scrolling through social media, it doesn't have that. And so he talked about an experiment that he had been doing, and I unknowingly have actually been doing this while I was reading the Rewilding book. So he talks about how for like the first hour of your day after you wake up, you should not pick up your phone. Don't pick up your phone. I mean, if you use it for your alarm, turn off your alarm, but don't open your apps, don't scroll through your social media, don't check the news for like the first hour. He said this is because when you first wake up in the morning, your brain needs time to acclimate to the physiological changes it underwent during sleep. So during REM sleep, you are in a state of neuroplasticity, and your brain actually works through a lot of emotional and logical contingencies that you experience during the day. So if you immediately, when you wake up, jump into a sensory experience, especially something so rich as social media, your brain skips over processing the information from the night. And this can be a big problem because during deep sleep, during REM sleep, that's how we deal properly with the emotional weight of what we experience during the day. So during the day, if you experience something negative or some type of trauma, when you sleep, you re-experience that, but without the adrenaline feedback response. And so that's how your brain, he explained it as your brain like shelving those experiences. And so then when you remember that later, it doesn't re-trigger those negative feelings. It's almost like a form of internal trauma therapy. So that's why he posed this this experiment of not picking up your phone in the morning. And I realized I've actually been doing this unintentionally, or somewhat unintentionally, because when I've been reading this book, I have started. So I'll wake up early in the morning, usually around 6 or 6:30, and I'll go out in the backyard with my dog, and I'll sit in the chair under the tree and read the book while she goes around and uses the restroom and smells all the squirrels that ran through the night before. And we'll just kind of sit out there and relax, and I'll read the book for a little while, and then I'll put it down and think about what I read for 30, 45 minutes until I go back inside and get ready for work. And it's been a really wholesome, peaceful experience. Like, on the days that I wake up late or the days that I'm in a rush, I'm finding that my day definitely doesn't go as smoothly. Like, I really miss those times in the morning to just sit and think out in nature.
I think I'm going to have to try that. It sounds like a great experiment, and I don't know. It's hard. The first thing I do when I wake up is, because my alarm's on my phone, I turn it off on my phone, and then my thumb's there, right? So it's like, oh, I need to see who sent what email during the night, what do I need to respond to, and I'm up and running. And it kind of sounds nice, almost like your personal news, like you said, almost like rewilding, like just being present first thing in the morning, and probably does have a huge impact on your day.
Yeah, it seems simple, and it is simple, but it really does make a big difference.
Very cool. Yeah, I'll have to watch that video. It sounds fascinating. I guess that brings me to mine, which isn't as deep or philosophical. As I was looking through all the news, I tried to stay up to date, which is really hard because there's nothing really good in the news. But I realized the last 3 or 4 weeks I've been talking about climate change, or it's something environmental based, which, I mean, my minor is in environmental science. I'm a biology. I got my degree in biology. And so that's what I'm passionate about, but I decided to go a little bit different. And this week I noticed a story from Vice News that the John Deere factory, the auto workers union, is striking for John Deere. They're saying about 10,000 people have walked off the job. This is the largest strike since 2019, and the last time the John Deere employees struck was, is that the right verb? Struck, stroked, striked?
I'm not sure. It might be one of those weird ones where to say it improperly is the proper way, depending on the meaning.
Then I will say the last time the John Deere employees striked, that for some reason that sounds good to me, was 1986. So it's been a long time since this happened.
Yeah.
The article basically said that, as most of you have experienced, there's a nationwide and for the most part, a worldwide labor shortage. There seems to be a lot less workers actually working right now, which is creating kind of the opportunity for workers to leverage for better pay, better work experiences type of thing. And so the union, I guess, rejected a contract. And looking through this article, their biggest complaint was that new hires didn't get a pension plan right out of the gate, and that salary hasn't kept up with inflation over the last couple of years. And so wages have stagnated, and new hires aren't getting pensions. And so they decided to walk.
I don't think salaries in any sector have kept up over the last 2 years, if I'm being honest.
Guaranteed, yeah.
But yeah, the last time I heard about, it's funny, the last time I heard about Vice News and John Deere was they did a documentary on these farmers that were unable to repair their equipment because of the computer controllers in the John Deere equipment. And so these farmers were going on these like BitTorrent sites and downloading like hacked John Deere firmwares from Russia, just so that they could repair their equipment, because they couldn't afford to, one, the downtime, and two, the cost of hauling the tractor or whatever to John Deere and paying thousands of dollars for them to fix whatever was wrong.
Sounds like they might be doing that again, considering the unions on strike. They might not have any representatives to fix their tractors.
Yeah. Yep.
Kind of makes me wonder, though, what's that going to do to our food prices? And I mean, John Deere built the American heartland.
It's true. I would have to look at some updated numbers on, because I know there's still a lot of our food grown within the country, but I know that I've also read, and perhaps I'm speaking incorrectly, if so, I apologize, but I feel like I had read that a lot of the agriculture within the U.S. had transitioned to corn and soybeans for like biofuel and soy-based products, but I'm sure it still is going to have an impact. It always does. So,
well, I mean, if anything, our heartland may produce corn for fuel now, but that's just going to hike up gas prices, which in turn affects everything, right? So
it's true. It's all connected.
Yeah. The joys of globalization, right?
Yep.
One more thing on that story before we jump into our main topic. They did state that John Deere saw its most profitable season last year, and 2021 is looking at being another huge increase of income for the company. So, I think I'm siding with the union on this one. If they're making a lot of money, maybe they should pay their workers.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to an earlier episode where we talked about the pay gap between executives and the cogs in the machine. And it's not surprising that they've had such a profitable year. I know with a lot of the supply chain issues and shipping problems, a lot of companies have had to turn to domestic production.
Mm-hmm. I think they're one of the few companies, I may be misquoting, but they're one of the few companies that still uses American steel, American rubber, and American parts. I don't think they outsource much.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. I know our grandpa had a John Deere tractor because I remember driving it around.
Oh, yeah. That thing was fun.
Yeah.
Well, our main topic today is all about the Roswell incident. For those of you that are not aware, this is we're doing a conspiracy theory show. So it's kind of a conspiracy theory, kind of history, a little bit of both. But if you joined us for our last conspiracy theory show, you know that the lines kind of blur. So we'll do a brief overview of what happened. And so I'll start that. And towards the end of World War II, a lot of the science fiction movies, magazines, radio dramas were all about flying saucers. And there was this flying saucer craze that just spread all over the world. And people were reading about it and watching it and getting excited about it. And so there was mass reportings of UFOs, flying saucers, from all over, from Mexico to Europe, to just the heartland of America. Everybody was seeing UFOs, and so they were kind of reporting that. And I say that, I preface this story with that because in 1947, a gentleman by the name of W.W. Mac Brazel, I'm assuming Brazel, he was out on his ranch in Roswell, New Mexico, and he stumbled across some strange wreckage that just didn't seem normal to him. And so he took this debris to the local sheriff. I didn't get the sheriff's name. And the sheriff, in turn, took the debris to the Roswell Army Airfield. Back at this time, there wasn't an Air Force. It was the Army Air Corps. So it was an Army airfield. And so the sheriff took it. And do you want to take the story from there?
Yeah. So the sheriff had, let me start out by saying a lot of the information that I researched on this comes from a documentary on Discovery Plus called Roswell: The Final Verdict. So if I misspeak, I apologize. I didn't have a ton of time to do research, but what I do have comes from that. So with that being said, the documentary made the point that the sheriff had a standing agreement with the local base there that if he had any problems in town, whether it was, drunk soldiers at the bar, or, reports of airplane disturbances, whatever, he would take it to the base commander. So when Mr. Brazel brought this debris to the sheriff and said that something had crashed in his field, the sheriff contacted the base commander. And then from there, it went up through the chain of command until it reached General Roger Ramey, who actually was stationed in Texas at the time. And General Ramey sent an Army intelligence officer, Major Jesse Marcel, to Mr. Brazel's ranch to investigate the claims. And so the rancher, Mr. Brazel, and Major Marcel went out to the debris field together to investigate. And the documentary I watched made a big point of taking some of these old audio and in some cases video recordings from the period and running them through an AI-powered neural linguistics engine that is supposed to be able to tell when somebody's lying. So it was almost like a lie detector test for some of these old recordings. But anyway, so they played some of the footage and had some interviews of Major Marcel talking about what they had found out in this debris field. And he said that when they went there, he was shocked by just the sheer quantity of this metallic substance that was all over the ground. And he also made a point in the recording to say that as somebody who worked in military intelligence, he felt like he was pretty familiar with all types of experimental aircraft, missiles. Basically, if it flew through the air, he felt like he knew about it. And he specifically called out that the debris that they found was like nothing he had ever seen on this earth. The pieces that they found were extremely hard. He talks about in the documentary about taking a hammer to it, like a sledgehammer, and not even being able to dent the material. And yet he said it weighed nothing. It was super light. And so that immediately made me think back to a book that I read called The Skunk Works that talked about the development of the SR-71, which had a lot of titanium parts. And the predecessor to that, the experimental version, was the A12. But I don't think that started being developed until about 5 years later. So then that led me down the rabbit hole of, okay, what other experimental aircraft were there at the time? Did any of them use titanium? And the only thing I could find is that the E02 spy plane had titanium wingtips, because if you if you're an aviation nerd like me, you know that the U2 has these super long, slender wings. They're so long that they droop and they like drag on the ground when the plane's on the ground. And so they had titanium wingtips to protect against that. And that's the only thing I could find. I mean, obviously, we don't know if this material was titanium, but it seems to fit the bill. At least I think it does. Something that's super hard yet super light. And the time period is kind of right. But I know the conspiracy theorists are going to say that I'm just drinking the Kool-Aid and trying to rationalize it. But I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. Later on in the history, they did declassify the program, and I don't want to give too much away right off the bat, but I do think that titanium could possibly be an answer, and I know with the advent of rocketry during World War II that we really were trying to push the boundaries of what humans could do up in the atmosphere. And so, I mean, titanium pieces really could be a possibility. It could be wreckage from a U-2 spy plane. It could be wreckage from a circuit board that where they used a different style of materials that, I mean, military intelligence doesn't necessarily give somebody clearance to know everything that the military is developing.
Right.
So, I don't know. But that show sounds fascinating, though, with the polygraphic tests on these old interviews. I look forward to seeing that. I don't know. A12 U2 wingtips. The more I think about it, the more that after listening to your take, and the more I think about it, the timing does seem to fit, and titanium really could be a factor. So I'm going to walk back much like the Air Force did, as and say it's a possibility. Which brings us to the next part of the story. The news of this had gotten out with the flying saucer fever that was spreading, and the media really wanted to interview and figure out what was going on. And members of the airbase actually said that they had recovered a flying disc from Mr. Brazel's ranch. And then the next day, the same airbase personnel debunked their claim that it was a flying disc, saying that it was a balloon with radar equipment on board. Which, to me, I mean, people have seen weather balloons. I think that's the biggest cop-out. They were definitely protecting something.
Yeah, the question is, what were they protecting, right? Was it
right?
Was it aliens, or was it some top secret technology?
Well, that's what we don't know.
So the next major development in the timeline, in 1980, Major Marcel's story came out in a book called The Roswell Incident. And in that book, the claim was that the government took the actual UFO wreckage to the Air Force Institute of Technology. And we're in the Air Force now, because the Air Force was formed after World War II and before the 80s. But so they took the wreckage allegedly took the UFO wreckage to the Air Force Institute of Technology in Ohio, and replaced it with weather balloon fragments in order to appease the locals. The other thing is that the book, The Roswell Incident, was the first time that it introduced the concept of, or the story rather, that they had recovered alien bodies, which was a secondhand story of a civil engineer that was in the area. So that book was the first time that piece of the story came out. And then, apart from the book, the other major development that happened in the 80s was that there was a set of documents which had supposedly been issued by President Truman that were the documents ordered that the incident needed to be covered up. And those documents were leaked to the press, and it came out as this huge scandal. However, the documents were later found to be forged, and that there was no official record of a cover-up mandate ever being issued, or so they say.
Right. I mean, it's the government. Oh yeah, those papers are forged. So that's not President Truman's signature on them. So yeah, that's the thing with these type of stories. You don't quite know where the truth is and where the lies begin. Like there's a fine line. But this book triggered more stories, more conspiracies, more people talking about it, which eventually led in 1992 for the UFO Museum to open its doors in Roswell, New Mexico. And I have not been. It's definitely on my list of places to go. But it documents UFO sightings from all over the world. It has supposed wreckage, casts of aliens, and all of that stuff. It just sounds like a fun time. In 1994, Project Mogul was declassified. And Project Mogul was a Cold War mission to detect nuclear tests from the Soviet Union during the time. And in the declassified documents, they claim that the Army Air Forces, or Army Air Corps and the Air Force, were testing out high altitude balloons with radar to detect bomb tests. And the wreckage found on the Brazel Ranch in New Mexico was actually a downed balloon that was being used to spy on Russia. So that's the official story from declassified documents. Shortly after that, in 1995, with the declassification of all this stuff, an alien autopsy film was leaked to the media. And I remember when I was in middle school, I used to watch sci-fi and History Channel and just eat up this UFO stuff. And I remember seeing it and going, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's amazing. They actually caught it. They actually caught something. Like, they definitely did it. And then the director actually came forward after this was leaked and admitted that it was basically a film school project, and that it was actors and not an actual alien autopsy. So heartbroken, but still. And then in 96, through the pandemic, basically, there's been an annual UFO festival that takes place every year. As annual means, I don't know the redundancy. I'm sorry. That takes place in Roswell. So that is the story of the Roswell incident in a nutshell. So I guess I'll ask the question: did aliens crash, or was it spy technology?
The question people have been asking for, 80 years at this point?
Yeah, it's been a while.
This one's a tough one. I don't know which side of the fence to come down on this one. I guess I would break it down into a couple of sub questions. So, overarching question: did aliens crash land in Roswell? So, point number one: does the government cover things up? Absolutely, without a doubt. Point number two: did they have a weather balloon program at the time? Yes. I don't know. I keep coming back though to until I had watched this stupid documentary. I was peaceful, I was naive. I keep coming back to those interviews with Major Marcel and the rancher's family, and I mean, obviously it's software. It's not proven, but all of Major Marcel's statements about the debris, as far as the software could tell, were 100% truthful. And a weather balloon, regardless of what it's made out of, if it's mylar or whatever, is not going to hold up to a strike from a sledgehammer. I mean, yes, it's going to be very lightweight, but I don't know. And then the next thing that I have to go to is, okay, well, regardless of whether, of the evidence, is it possible that aliens could have crash landed? Okay, well, do I think aliens exist? And I mean, just based on the math, I have to say yes. I mean, with all of the billions and billions of stars and galaxies and trillions of planets, it would be much more shocking if there wasn't life on other planets than if there was. Now, is that life intelligent, and are they able to cross, vast distances that require faster than light travel? Maybe not. But it's hard to say. I mean, the universe has been around for a very long time. How far could a civilization have progressed in that time? I think it's possible. So I think if I had to break everything down into the different aspects, what's possible, what's not. Did aliens crash land in the desert in Roswell? I'm going to say no, but I'm going to say it's like a 40 to 45%. Like, it's almost believable, but not quite. I think the government was definitely covering something up, but I don't think it was an alien crash landing, at least not in this incident.
Fair. Yeah. I don't know where I stand on it. When I was reading and researching through online encyclopedias and official sources and looking at the government side, I came into this episode going, they declassified it, they explained it away, it makes sense. But the more I looked into it, the more I'm going, but things don't add up. Why would the Air Force personnel, I'm just going to say Air Force because Army Air Corps is too long. There's a reason why they changed it, and I'm going to say it. But why would they come out and say, oh yeah, we recovered a flying saucer, and then the next day go, oh, actually, it was a balloon? As you were saying with this documentary, people saw it. They saw something that they can't explain. And it may not have been a flying saucer, but I mean, you're not going to change people's mind saying, oh no, what you really saw was this. You didn't see that. And we don't have that little flashy thing from Men in Black yet to actually alter people's perceptions. So we know that what they saw is what they saw. So I'm going to go with you. I'm going to say plausible. I'm going to say, did a flying saucer crash in Roswell, New Mexico? Maybe. 50-50. Could have been a spy plane. Could have been just what the U.S. government said. It was something that they were using to spy on the Russians. Or it could have been something from a neighboring system. The one thing that I think about when I think about aliens, though, is our human understanding of space and time. We currently understand there to be limits, that you can't travel faster than the speed of light, that light and the whole theory of relativity, the closer you get to the speed of light, the more you're going to weigh. Like, you're going to basically splatter yourself like a bug against a windshield if you ever got to the speed of light. It really makes the idea of interstellar travel a little far-fetched, in my opinion.
Yeah,
But
I mean, again, the best we can estimate is based on our current scientific understanding, which is that according to Newtonian physics and Einstein's theory of relativity, you can't travel faster than the speed of light. So based on that,
well,
I don't know, like you said, or I guess like you alluded to, it's entirely possible that some type of craft crashed in the Roswell desert. But if we're talking percentages and probability, I think the probability is that it was something of terrestrial origin. Some type of experimental aircraft, or maybe like an early drone technology developed for the Cold War.
agreed. Can we put this one to bed?
Well, we can. I don't know that it's ever going to be put to bed. I think the last 80 years have proved that. But
yeah, I guess I kind of gave you my answer, but your thoughts are aliens among us?
That's define aliens. Little gray men? No.
Have we been inundated with the grays, the reptoids? I can't remember what the other one was. I was going to write a post on our website about them, and I can't remember.
In the classic sense of an alien, no, I don't think that they're walking around among us wearing disguises a la Men in Black. Do I think that there could be other beings, other life forms? Maybe we'll get into that in a future episode.
Ooh, I like it. All right. I guess we'll close with our kind of mindfulness moment or spiritual journey. I don't think we have figured out what we want to call this yet. I kind of like the mindfulness moment, especially after today's news.
It's got good alliteration.
Yeah. So, I was thinking about our topic today with the Roswell incident and extraterrestrials, and it kind of got me to thinking about a lot of Native American myths. many tribes in the American West have a belief of a connection to the stars. Many have creation myths where their tribe, their people came from the stars, or that the star people helped them out. There's a story of, I think it was a Dakota or a Lakota myth of some people being chased by a bear and pleading with the star people for help, and then being snatched from the grass to this bear, and basically being put up on top of a mountain, right? And so I just think it's interesting that in Native American folklore, there's a lot of connection to the star. And from what I've found, is these myths of the star people. They go from California to the Mississippi River, and from as far south as the Aztecs all the way up to basically the Canadian border. Like a huge swath of the Americas have myths and legends regarding star people. So kind of made me think, thinking hard about it, there's always a part of me that believes that there's truth in every culture's ancient stories, whether it's the Eddas of the Norse, or the Bible, or any of that. I believe that there's truths in them, and it kind of made me think, like, are these star people aliens? Maybe. They may not be. Most cultures and religions have these holy entities from the heavens that help us. In the Abrahamic faiths, we have angels. The Norse have Valkyries. The Eastern faiths have avatars of their creator, or saints of the Buddha, who through enlightenment have gone up to the stars and then come back down to help us kind of live our best life and return to the creator, right? And so, are they aliens? Are they some different beings? I'm not sure, but it's something interesting to think about. So that was my mindful moment for the week, just kind of thinking outside of myself and looking at all the different cultures. So Adam, do you want to close with any thoughts on that? Or
Sure. It is interesting that all of these cultures across time and across the world have similar recurring themes of people from the stars or from the heavens or whatever. When I was doing my research, there was a different documentary I was watching, and I've been trying to search and find it, but I can't. But there is I want to say it's in Australia, but I might be misspeaking. But there's a culture of native peoples that the entire basis of their religion, for lack of a better word, is a crater that was caused by a meteorite. And all of their religious stories have to do with how this crater was formed and what beings may have created it. And then also Mecca in the Middle East. I don't know how familiar our listeners are with this, but there's this large square structure that's been built over the top of a mysterious black stone, and people make this pilgrimage for months, years in some cases. Sometimes it's a once in a lifetime thing to come in and touch or kiss this stone. And while I don't mean to disrespect their beliefs, it's pretty well believed among the scientific community that it's a meteorite that was discovered, and this, holy site was created around it. And I mean, I've seen meteorites in museums and things like that, and they are bizarre looking. Like it's not difficult to see why somebody would think that they were created or sent from omnipotent beings from another world. So I guess I see it as maybe two possibilities. Either there's truth to all this, and there is a common theme among cultures for a reason, or if I'm being cynical, maybe it's just because meteorites fall all over the earth, and so it's a recurring thing. I mean, you can imagine if you're living in the distant past and have yet to invent technology, and you see the entire sky light up. Like I remember there was one in Russia not too long ago that I remember seeing footage of on the internet that people captured on like dash cams and stuff. And it's seriously like the entire sky looked like it was on fire. I mean, I can only imagine what I would have thought, today, knowing what I know now and what science knows now. I mean, imagine seeing something like that thousands of years ago, and then, traveling to where the impact was, and you see this mysterious, glowing, molten stuff in the middle of this gigantic crater. I mean, yeah, I would probably think it was sent by the gods. So I guess that's my thoughts on it.
Perfect. Well said. Oh, and Colorado had a fireball meteor last week, 2 weeks ago. People were picking it up on their Ring doorbells, and it was kind of cool.
Maybe you should go see if you can find it.
I don't know.
Settle it once and for all.
No, I'm sure it burned up. I mean, they basically said that those fireballs, the ones that light up the whole sky, usually occur when it's big enough that it kind of breaks apart at a certain point. Yeah. They don't usually hit.
Yeah, I think I remember learning in middle school or junior high that the vast majority of meteors burn up before they become meteorites.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is probably good for life on this planet.
Yeah, it's almost like this planet developed an atmosphere to protect us from that type of thing.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? Further proof that we're in the Matrix.
There you go. Maybe that would be a good theory. We'll have to put that one on the list too.
I like it. Anyway, before we go any longer, because this episode was a lot longer than I think either one of us intended, we're going to go ahead and close by saying join us next week. If you've ever wondered where the things that go bump in the night come from, or about how to protect yourself from them, tune in on next Sunday when we keep our Spooktober programming going with a discussion on the classic monsters and myths of Halloween. See you then.
Do you have a request for a subject you'd like us to talk about on a future episode? Or is there a particular topic for which you have a passion and you'd like to come on the show as a guest? Either way, send an email to podcast@viewsfromtheworldtree.com or message us through one of our social media accounts, the links to which can be found on our new website, viewsfromtheworldtree.com. Also, if you have a moment, we would appreciate it if you could leave us a rating on iTunes or on the podcast app of your choice. It makes a huge difference, especially for new podcasts. Thanks.